Hello, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the monthly webinar series of the UPTAKE project. We are very happy to host this event today. This webinar happens every month, the second week of every month, so you can register for this event and every month follow the talks that we are hosting every second Wednesday of the month. Remember that you need the registration to receive the Zoom link for the call. And today we are happy to have distinguished speakers and panelists that helps us in this webinar. Just before we start, I talk a little bit about the background of the institute that we have and hosting this institute. So we are at CMCC, which is in Italy, based in Italy. It's a leading research center focused on understanding the interaction between climate change and society. We have offices across Italy and 3 institutes with over 450 researchers in different disciplines that working on the different topics of climate change. The project that we have represented today from is the UPTAKE project funded by European Commission. And as you can see in this slide, we have over 20 partners from different institutes across Europe. We have created an online platform for interested stakeholders and researchers who are interested in following the outcome of the research that we are working on. You can scan the QR code on this page and join our online platform and receive updates, something like this webinar that you are now currently watching, but also other papers, any other developments from the project. For today, we are happy to have Mathias Fridahl, who is gonna talk about potential and goal conflicts in reverse auction design for bioenergy with carbon capture and storage. The panelist is Filip Johnsson and the moderator Wilfried Rickles. I will hand it over to Wilfried and happy to support you here. Thank you very much. If you need also to interact with the speakers, please use the Q&A session, Q&A icon that you see under the screen and type in your questions that the panelists and the moderators and the speaker can access to that. Thank you very much. I stop sharing and Wilfried, back to you. Thank you.
All right, so I thank you so much, the audience. I have now the honor to introduce the topic. So I start sharing my screen. I hope you can see it well. Yeah, today we will talk about this paper, potential and goal conflicts in reverse auction design for bioenergy.
We do see it, Wilfried, we do see it in the wrong. We see if you switch we see both your next slide and the one present. So if you could go up there and just switch the.
Let me try again. I don't have notes here, so it wouldn't be a problem.
Yeah.
But is it better now?
Yeah, yeah.
Cool. So we start again. This is the paper. It's about bioenergy with CCS. And bioenergy or bioenergy with CCS is a special case because bioenergy is already present in the European energy mix, providing about 11% of total energy. And if you only look at electricity, it's already 6%. And it's capable of providing baseload. So in a future energy mix, it will become more and more important. So since we are having it already in the sense that it will become more and more important, it's a straightforward idea to combine this with carbon capture and storage, CCS, and have it then as a relevant method for future net zero strategies of the EU. And as you see, the removal potential is still very uncertain, and this range becomes even larger if bio-CCS is in general considered. We focus here on BECCS, and BECCS has another feature which distinguishes it from other CDR methods. It would be a straightforward candidate for the inclusion in the UPTAKE. Why? Because it has an emitting activity, and that's the scope of the UPTAKE. So it would fall under the scope of the UPTAKE directive. Currently, those installations which exclusively use biomass are excluded. So there's an exemption. So once you would repeal this exemption or this exclusion and would provide these installations with free allowances under the free allocation scheme, then you would make them from an economic point of view indifferent. You would give them an incentive to use in addition CCS so that they would not use this freely received allowances and could sell them to the market. And that would then implicitly be carbon removal certificates. And if you would use the existing pool of allowances to do such a free allocation, it would mean that the net emissions would in fact decrease. If you would create extra allowances, which would be given to these BECCS installations, you would keep the net zero emissions unchanged. So there's quite some potential or ideas to include it in the climate policy. And we were recently arguing as part of what we are doing in UPTAKE that we say, okay, well, there are still several things which need to be discussed and sorted out, but we need to stipulate learning in these technologies. And therefore, the EU should somehow start with a procurement program for CDR, including not only BECCS, but also then other CDR methods. And while you start procuring, do this kind in a sense of forward trading, you can sort out in parallel the details of integrating it in the UPTAKE. But you have, in a sense, a positive option value in building up this reserves. And luckily, Sweden is already doing it. They started basically from themselves with the idea to come up with a reverse auction system where they are planning to spend about 3.6 billion euro to buy removal certificates from bioenergy with carbon capture and storage. And right now, it's still unclear where to use them, so to say. I think, and Mathias will correct me later if it's not super precise, I think they were planning to have them under the effort sharing pillar. So that's the middle pillar of the EU climate policy. But the EU is still reluctant, let me say it that way, to follow here the idea of the Swedish strategy. And therefore, one idea would be, okay, to say, well, we do not allow you to use them right now in the effort sharing, so in the middle pillar, but you might use them, or we want to use them later in the left pillar. An idea would be to transfer them to a central pool, so a reserve, to be built up, which then can be used in the future net zero or net negative UPTAKE, where you then start auctioning off these certificates. And thinking ahead of it, how the UPTAKE currently works is that the member countries receive auction shares proportional to their verified emissions. And it's very straightforward then to think about what it happens in a net zero or net negative system. That's then the contribution, which could be either physical or financially in terms of carbon dioxide removal, would also need to be proportional to verified emissions. And it would be an option now to already make some kind of dynamic incentives to provide Sweden an option that they can transfer these removal certificates that are currently bound to a central reserve. And well, you either give them some kind of interest payment on early payments or you a discount on later obligations. But as you should say, or should notice, I'm pointing to various options, and that's the thing we still need to sort out. And these are all kind of top-down considerations, and it's very important to not forget what, in fact, the actors in this market thinking about how they respond to such a procurement system and how happy they are with it. And that's, I think, still a gap in the literature, which was started looking into it. There are many more questions to have insights what these actors think about this reverse auction system in Sweden. And now I have the honor to hand over to Mathias, who will guide you to this paper. After that, we have then one round interaction with Filip, who can also provide quite some relevant insights regarding bioenergy in general and BECCS in particular. And then we will open it for the discussion to the floor. As Sohail said before, I think there are quite some people in the audience, so you can also just put it into the Q&A, and I will then kind of look at those questions and give them later to Mathias or Filip, or try to answer them myself. Okay, now I stop sharing and hand over to Mathias.
Thanks, Wilfried.
Oh, I haven't stopped yet. No.
Okay. Yes, so I'm going to talk a little bit more about using reverse auctions to incentivize BECCS. And of course, to know anything about this, you need some experience, something to study. And globally, there is no reverse auction that has been applied to incentivize BECCS. So there is plenty of reverse auctions in environmental governance for renewable energy, for ecosystem services, for example, and long experience with it. But BECCS is a peculiar situation, I should say. So we turned to Sweden, where we have had this discussion about reverse auctions for quite some time, since at least 2018 as an option, and particularly from 2020 forward, when we actually proposed reverse auctions in a public inquiry as the main vehicle in the midterm to incentivize BECCS in Sweden. And why Sweden then? Why is the Swedish government interested in BECCS to begin with? And that's provided by or given by a quite peculiar way of constructing the net zero target in Sweden. We have a separate emissions reductions target. We should reduce emissions in Sweden by at least 85% by 2045. And then the remaining residual emissions we have to find something else. We have to find some way of counterbalancing the remaining maximum 15% of residual emissions. Then we call that supplementary measures, and those are removals or verified international offsets. But it's important to understand that in the Swedish context, the Swedish government is not allowed to use the existing LULUCF sink to meet this target. And the existing sink, LULUCF net sink in Sweden, is quite big. It's in the order of 30 to 40 million tons annually. This is not allowed to be used to meet the target. So therefore, the Swedish government has to look for other options to achieve removals. And BECCS is one of these options. Wilfried already mentioned that the BECCS reverse auction has a budget appropriation of 3.6 billion now, up until 2046, to start exploring this technical potential. Because there is a big technical potential, so that's why the Swedish government has singled out BECCS as one of these supplementary measures. We have had a fuel shift in Sweden for a long time, and this shift is still ongoing. We decrease fossil emissions and increase biogenic emissions through this fuel shift. So that's important to understand as well. Wilfried mentioned that, well, we can, of course, study this top down, but there is also an opportunity through the Swedish experience now to start asking questions about what different actors think about the possibility of engaging with an auction for BECCS. And this is exactly what we have done in this paper, Wilfried, me, and Liv Lundberg, and also Kenneth Möllersten. Why do we think it's important then? Well, auctions, reverse auctions are often used for either price discovery purposes or to achieve cost-efficient allocation of public funding to a particular service that the government is interested in. Normally, as mentioned, in renewable energy or ecosystem services. And of course, for BECCS, if there is no willingness to bid, these ambitions or these goals with a reverse auction are undermined. If you don't have enough bidders, you don't have competition. If you don't have competition, the possibility to achieve cost-efficient allocation of contracts are undermined or is undermined. And also for price discovery purposes, it becomes complicated if you have very few bidders, of course. And this is maybe not so important if you have a lot of experience. We don't have experience with reverse auctions for BECCS. We have it for other options, but not for BECCS, so that complicates things. It's also perhaps less important if you have very many prospective bidders. Whether that's the case or not, well, it depends on context, of course. In Sweden, that's not the case. So if you look at these big sources of biogenic emissions, they are actually allocated or located in quite a few point sources. On the left axis here, you have the number of facilities. On the x-axis, you have the facility size organized in sort of categories of, well, emissions of biogenic carbon dioxide. And you can see that when it comes to bigger facilities that has more technical potential for BECCS with benefits of scale, there are actually quite few potential facilities that could be interested in placing bids in an auction like this. So it's important then to understand under what circumstances are the facility owners willing to bid in an auction for BECCS. And this is what we asked questions about. So we interviewed 35 actors. Actually, quite a few of those were prospective bidders, so actors with potential for BECCS. Some of them were also representing the auctioneer. I'm going to focus here on the prospective bidders and discuss some of the results or present some of the results. It's just really a brief snapshot of results. And I'm just going to present a few examples from 3 out of the 4 themes we identified, and then let's have a discussion and see if you have questions about more things that came up. One of the themes had to do with entry criteria and scope. There is a lot of literature on this, and there is a need for reverse auctions to find an optimal balance between quite relaxed pre-qualification standards in order to achieve maximum participation in an auction, and thereby, of course, create competition and preconditions for high cost efficiency. But there is also a need to have maybe stringent criteria rather than relaxed criteria in order to ensure maximum effectiveness. So you want the bidders that bid in the auction also to have capacity to complete or fulfill their contracts and their obligations. And without stringent criteria, previous experience with reverse auctions have shown that the effectiveness of the auction is undermined. So that balance has to be found by the auctioneer. And from the bidder's perspective, it's very important to understand then that they think that stringent pre-qualification criteria might deter their opportunity to place bids, because they think already that doing BECCS is very cumbersome. It's nothing that is part of their ordinary business model or activities, their value chain in general. It's something that they would engage with in order to provide a public good. It's nothing where they see a big profit margin or a possibility to earn a lot of money, according to the interviews at least. And there are a lot of uncertainties for these operators when it comes to BECCS, because it's relatively untested, especially the whole technology change. So there is a tendency among many bidders to say, well, we are interested in placing bids, but we are also considering a wait and see approach and hope that others will place bids, especially in the first auction, so that they can pave the way and be early adopters and reduce uncertainties. And then maybe later on we can join the train sort of and place bids in future auctions. And this is particularly true for bigger facilities in the pulp and paper sector, where the margins are very small and where public ownership is quite rare, for example. So it's going to be quite hard to attract, according to this study, then these potential bidders to actually place bids. Another thing that comes up is the tendency in the government to want to have a volume cap. So a volume cap for these auctions align very well with the target construction in Sweden and the way we have also designed our milestone targets. But a volume cap is also what might also undermine the efficiency, the cost efficiency, because it's going to be hard to allocate the contract to the last winning bid. And it's just exemplified here in a really random bid structure. It's not a problem for normal reverse auctions in renewable energy or ecosystem services because the marginal cost curve is normally quite flat towards the end of the winning bids, or where you cut the sort of volume for the auction, but it's much more complicated for BECCS, especially since you can't really downscale a bid without raising the cost because of the substantial benefits of scale involved in BECCS. And this is something where bidders think that it's important that the auctioneer thinks carefully about this and maybe don't have a volume cap in order not least to preserve public acceptance for the auction system, so that it's not seen as something that is wasting public funding on relatively expensive procurement. Finally, I should mention something on the fourth, or in my examples here, the third example, but the fourth theme we identified, it had to do with business models and credit ownership. And here the dilemma is that co-financing from the private sector may increase the possibility of actually deploying BECCS in Sweden. You may get more BECCS by using public funding to leverage private funding. But very few actors in the private sector, very few private investors seems to be interested in this unless they can make offset claims. And of course, if you allow offset claims, then there is the risk that the climate benefit is undermined. There is also risk of double counting and obscuring transparency in reporting. So this is something where it's also quite hard to design these auctions if you allow for selling credits to the private sector. And many of the bidders agree that the mitigation outcome should be registered in the Swedish greenhouse gas inventory, but also, not all, but many of these potential bidders also argue that the same mitigation outcomes should be, or it should be able to, the actor should be able to trade credits of the same mitigation outcome on the voluntary carbon market for offsetting purposes. So that's something for the auctioneer to deal with as well in designing the auction. Now the first auction has been held and the auction has been designed, and quite a few of the things we discuss in the paper have been taken up by the auctioneer and actually is part of the final design of the auctions. Even though the auctions are quite generous in terms of pre-qualification criteria, in terms of flexibility and so on and so forth, only 4 serious bids were provided in the auction. I guess we haven't studied it. We are considering studying this, but a few hypotheses why this could be the case. Well, the uncertainties, as mentioned, and that means also the investment risk is still very, very high. The cost of providing BECCS is really hard to know anything about before more and more actors have tried this. So I think that's probably have scared some off and made many potential bidders actually wait and see if someone else can lower these uncertainties. There is also a relatively short commissioning time allowed, 3 years. You can apply for a continuation or more time up to 5 years, but a short commissioning time that I think probably have scared some of these potential bidders off. There is a ban on sort of renting out the chimney. So some of these actors, the ones that have these facilities, they thought that they could possibly contract or cooperate with third parties that were interested in placing bids in the auctions to hook up to chimneys and provide BECCS to the government. But this is not allowed according to the auction design. So that might have scared one or a few actors off as well. There is a regulation to deduct public support in proportion to private revenues. So if you have private revenues, if you sell credits on the voluntary market, your public support will be reduced. And I think this has probably also scared some off the thought that private revenues would be some kind of profit margin or some way of hedging against risk. Anticipated competition probably might have scared some off, where some actors think that they can't compete, especially not in a first auction, so they might wait and see again, and not waste time on this. And I think probably also the electricity price trends may have deterred some from placing bids in the first auction. With increasing electricity prices, especially if you use a lot of electricity for your capture unit, which is the case in some of the technical options explored in Sweden. But these are just hypotheses, so let's see. We have to study this also and follow up with a study on why the bidders with technical potential has not placed bids. Okay, that's all I wanted to say. Wilfried, back to you.
Thank you so much. I think then we first open the floor to Filip to have some feedback from him, or questions or suggestions.
Yeah. That's thank you very much both for your presentations. Maybe after all, I'll show 2 slides just to before I ask. Let's see here. I can share my where is it here? Screen. Not so used at Zoom. And that's the screen. Okay. What do you see now? I guess.
We'll try to presenter mode and maybe then.
Yeah. So okay. So now let's see here now. So now you see correct, or do you see a slide?
It's gone. So it was better before.
Sorry. Okay. Maybe I stop sharing and what's this? Where is the Zoom? Screen. I'm not used to. Do you see? I guess you see my whole screen now.
Yes. So your Explorer.
Yeah. So how do I stop sharing? Where is it?
There should be a button on the top where you have the option.
Yeah, it's just that I don't see the. Where is the? Jesus. I don't see I just see you, but where is the main Zoom screen? Screen sharing. No. Okay.
Very good.
Okay, so I stop. No, I'm not sharing now.
No, it's perfect.
What is perfect?
So I mean, we are not seeing your Explorer, but if you want to try sharing again.
Okay, I give it one more try.
Okay, maybe you put it first in presenter mode, and then you start sharing, and then go to the screen.
Okay. What's this now? Where is the? I stopped the whole thing. Jesus. Let's see. I just try it once more. Let's see. And so. And then I put it in presenter mode. But then I don't see the Zoom. I give up. Okay, because I don't see the. If I put it in presenter mode, I don't see the Zoom. So very strange. Okay. Well, yeah. Actually, what I wanted to show, there were 2 slides. One slide was related to that. It was a map over the emission sources in Sweden, the biogenic ones, and then there was also about the marginal cost curve for this that we have calculated, which we actually showed in the previous when we presented some in another uptake webinar last year. So and the point was that the conditions, it relates to what Mathias said, that the costs are obviously rather different for these units that can offer these negative emissions. So for instance, the higher the CO2 concentration in the flue gas, the the lower the specific cost in euros per ton of CO2 avoided will be, and also the geographical location, for instance, if it's nearby the coast, where we have several of our biggest emission sources are near the coast, and that will facilitate transportation by ship to a storage location. By the way, we not really have any storage locations in Sweden. I mean, there are some potential ones, but so we have to store the CO2 under the seabed of the North Sea typically. But then there are also many, those that are nearby the coast are typically pulp and paper mills, and they are the largest point sources of emissions. And then we have also combined heat and power plants, and those are obviously related to district heating systems, so they are available throughout Sweden, and many of those are located inland. So my point is that the potential is quite big for BECCS in Sweden, but the cost will be rather different. So that relates to, I guess, what you said, Mathias, that when you have an auctioning system, it's not obvious what one can expect. There may be very different interest to participate, but the costs are also very different. So that is, so maybe to start to ask both of you a question related to that. I think that also actually goes for the EU ETS from fossil. If you take cement plants, for instance, we have them all through Europe, and obviously it will be a lot cheaper for those that are located nearby the coast in Europe, in continental Europe, to apply CCS, because CCS is required for cement. But those that are inland, far from the coast, will have a much higher cost. So that is something that, from a policy perspective, one can think about. How is that possible to somehow handle, or because otherwise we will, one can think of it. We have really an increased cost but how can we sort of derive what we can expect from this, considering that there are so quite large differences in costs? I don't know if you, Mathias, do you have any spontaneous comments on that in addition to what you said?
Yeah, I think that, I mean, that's one of the main motivating factors in the Swedish system to opt for a reverse auction rather than a flat rate subsidy or some other form of system. In particular, because there is so big information asymmetries between public authorities and the private actors. The private actors know some of the cost, not all of it, because there are so much uncertainties, but they know the cost picture much better, of course, than the public authorities. So, and because the marginal cost curve is so different, that's also a reason for applying a reverse auction. But it only works well if there is big competition in the auction. And I mean, it remains to be seen. We have to evaluate the first auction round, but it seems from just counting the number of bids that maybe this has not been very successful. So that's a problem. But I think go for a reverse auction or a cap and trade system, it can incentivize quite well these types of investments where the cost of doing those investments are the lowest. So I think both of those types of systems or incentive structures or incentives are relatively well prepared for BECCS. Would you like to add something, Wilfried?
Yes. So regarding your example you use with cement, the answer would be, well, you start with those installations where it's the cheapest. So I mean, that's the idea of the cap and trade system. And since allowances are going to zero, prices will increase. And at some points also those cement factories in less favorable places, for them it would become competitive to use it in combination with CCS, or they then shut down. So I mean, that's the idea to
sure, I get that, but the point I think is that you can also change it has to also do with the credibility of the system, that you may change, for instance, where the cement is, you can export, and also that maybe there will be I mean, I can just see when these free allowances are phased out, that you have countries that will have in Europe that will have be less fortunate in this, and they may renegotiate. And so I think there are some problems there. I mean, sure, in principle, of course, that's what you say, but I think there are some things there that may make the system. Yeah, some actors will not accept the system or negotiate, and you will also the competition between will not be perceived as fair and so on. So I think there may be some challenges there. I think
there are a lot of challenges.
Yeah.
But no, I use your cement example. I wanted to add that first with BECCS, where we're still much less mature technology. It could be the case that with such a reverse auction system, you come up with a price for the cheapest combination. But in fact, another technology combination might have better prospects in the long term. And therefore, it's very difficult now when you think about this procurement, how much you should differentiate first between, of course, different CDR technologies, and then even with. So should it be that, for example, in a BECCS facility, which has currently less favorable conditions, also receives then some kind of higher price to just keep this technology developed. And yes, but to your point, I mean, from just taking the written rules of the ETS, so it should not happen. But of course, there will be a lot of political pressure on 2030 onwards on this whole system. I particularly don't see this phase out of free allocation for the cement sector such a big problem, but for other sectors, that's of course a problem that we will end free allocation. That's true.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, we shouldn't go into cement because that's not the topic of the.
No, but I mean it's related. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, thanks. Another thing I think at this point we don't really know what will be sort of disclosed in terms of the financial, what we can understand for these companies that have provided bids and so on. But one thing, although it may not be intentional, but this could be related to what do we know, what the income from this reversed auctioning system, provided that there may be some profits and so on, or any such policy, what these companies will use this money for. Because I think a little bit that there could be a risk that this moral hazard that you sort of postpone. I mean, you can think of that they earn money from this, and maybe they invest those money in something that emits fossil emissions. So what do you think about this, the link between how do we avoid that we end up, if it becomes too profitable and the other climate policy for fossil fuel is too weak, we may have an imbalance here. Anything that you have been thinking of, Mathias?
You think in relation to reverse auctions or in relation?
Yeah. As an example, I mean, you can think of that. I mean, just one thing. Suppose that this, on the longer run, we will end up in a situation that the reward of creating negative emissions is higher than the punishments, the cost to emit fossil emissions. That wouldn't really be that smart, I think. Of course, in an introduction, which is this case now, when we have we want to develop technology, of course, then one can see it as a support for that. But from a pure policy perspective, that will be, I think, troublesome to have such a situation.
So when it comes to the reverse auctions, they are regulated in such a way that profits should be, that you shouldn't make profits, or not very high profits anyway. There is a possibility to make temporary profits because you underestimated how cheap it would be. It's very hard to estimate exactly the cost of implementing this, but you should use open books and report to the agency, the government, the energy agency that is administrating these auctions. And then the support will be adjusted according to the actual costs that you have. But there is opportunity to have some profit margin, of course, in this also. There might be a small risk of that kind. But when it comes to the EU ETS, it's much more complicated. So therefore, both Wilfried and I are also suggesting that we should have a conditional integration of carbon removal into the EU ETS. It should not be unconditional. It should not be on the same market as ordinary allowances, but rather we need to start learn today how to do CDR cost efficiently, and therefore we need to start some form of incentive that is strong enough to incentivize actually doing and testing BECCS and other forms of removals. And therefore we propose this, let's say, institutional mandate that we term it the carbon central bank that can start a procurement program and fill a reserve, a credit reserve with removal credits. But these credits should not be applied to the EU ETS market, allowance market today, because there is also ample opportunity to continue learning to abate emissions in the fossil sector. So it's rather to stockpile these credits for use in the future when you might need to supply credits to the allowance market in order to have some form of price stabilization function. So it's important for the EU ETS. I think Wilfried also agrees with me to only integrate CDR conditionally with this condition. But since we need to start learn, we also need to start paying removal actors what it actually costs to do removal today with relatively low technological maturity in some of these technologies or methods.
But yeah, good you clarified if they're open books, but what couldn't BioEnergy, if there are open books and you're not allowed to make any profit, why would you do it?
Yeah, no, for multiple reasons, I would say, but some of these sectors are actually publicly owned. So take Stockholm Exergi, for example. The municipality, Stockholm City municipality, owns half of the operation, and they have their own very ambitious climate targets. So they also have ownership directives, for example. It differs between different actors, but that's one reason why you engage in this, despite the high risks and limited opportunities for revenues, or I mean profits, I should say. But at the same time, it's important for almost all of I would say for all of these sectors to have full cost coverage. Otherwise, they won't do it. They need to be assured that they can be guaranteed to be paid the cost of doing this. So that's important. But the profit margin for some of them is less relevant. For others, it's more relevant. And I think for that reason, the way the auction were eventually designed might have declined to place bids in the auction because they are not allowed to do the type of profit they are used to do, and they therefore would like to do something else. And also, I mean, if you implement BECCS, there could also be some risks associated with it. I mean, that you have outages of plants and all that and so on. And as you pointed out, there was also one actor that gave a bid, a refinery, and of course that's a private firm. So maybe they do it for some. I mean, it could be goodwill or I guess. But there another quite common, because we asked about this also, why would you even consider BECCS? We only asked actors that are considering to place bids or have voiced publicly that they are interested somehow. And many actors also see that they can compete on existing markets for their ordinary products. So let's say it's a fuel or it's a paper or a board or something like that. And they can market this paper as climate positive instead of climate neutral, for example. And that may then increase their market share on their paper market or fuel market or whatever, because they have received funding from the Swedish government to do BECCS. So there is also that motivation for some of the more privately owned companies, for example. But that means that what they can claim is that they have contributed to help Sweden to reach our targets, I guess. So yeah, I mean, if it's their own product, if it's not, they're not selling credits to Microsoft or whatever. Yeah. If it's their own product that they market on or sell on their own in their own value chain, then they then they can claim that it's less has a lower climate impact or is even climate positive. Yeah. While you report your emissions then to of course to the government, and the government enter the negative emissions in the Swedish greenhouse gas inventory. Yeah. Well,
so I have a final question for Mathias, and then I think we have to take some questions from the floor. beyond what you asked them, do you have some implicit feedback gotten in how far uncertainty about storage cost is also a factor? Because as Filip right said, different bidders or potential bidders have different concepts of storage, and some I think are transporting it to Norway. And is there uncertainty that they can make long-term contracts for a fixed price, which will they then have to pay Northern Lights for storage, or is there uncertainty that the prices for storage become so steep that they would not commit to such a provision of BECCS in the future?
Actually, it seems not to be the price as such. The price is quite hefty, I should say. It's secret, but from what I hear from the actors, it's quite high, but they know the price. The problem is the capacity. So there is limited capacity currently to store carbon dioxide geologically, and it's very hard to get a share of that capacity and be assured that you can actually access capacity to inject carbon dioxide geologically. And that, I think, has been a problem for many of these actors, that they haven't been able to secure a memorandum of understanding or similar upfront before the auction, and therefore it's risky to place a bid because you might not be able to deliver on it. So storage capacity also is something, a bottleneck somehow in this system that has to be developed in parallel. But of course, storage providers, they want to be assured that there is capture capacity enough to fill the storages. So it's kind of it has to go hand in hand. And I think the government has to play a quite big role in leading these sectors forward, because there are a lot of investment risks, and the investments are quite big. So they need, I think, the help of governments here.
Yeah, and maybe then a question to both of you, and I tried to already put in there a question from the floor. So when I was doing the slides, I was surprised how little the import of biomass is. So that means most of biomass we are using is from the Europe, and there are sometimes expressed concerns that we will then have an inflow of unsustainable harvested biomass. But what is your opinion? Is there anything in this specific reverse auction system or kind of procurement systems in general where policymakers should take care to take sustainability criterion or water scarcity issues or something into account? What be your view on this?
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I think that's a very important point. Of course, that you have to have some sort of certification system and so on, which EU has, of course. But my concern, and that's we're actually working a bit on and looking at, is that, and that's particular for BECCS, is that since biomass is a limited resource, by incentivizing the emissions rather than on the supply side, basically you could say, if you should be provocative, you could say that you incentivized inefficiency. So that is my problem with, and it doesn't go for any such any BECCS policy that incentivize negative emissions. Because if you take a pulp and paper plant, for instance, they produce different goods, the electricity, pulp, obviously. We have also product now, lignin and so on, and possibly then also CO2, negative CO2 for negative emissions. So we are looking at but we're looking at a proposed way of another way to handle that, because I think as long as you have that, it will be a little bit fundamental problem there, I think, actually. So that's I think is my main concern with this any such CDR policy, but which is a special case then for bio-CCS, because then the climate benefit may not be. You can think in an extreme case, if you have really subsidized it a lot, you can just burn biomass and store the CO2, but then you withdraw that biomass from a lot of other potential use that has a higher climate benefit because there are problems of substitution. So I think that's, I mean, I think it's good that we now try this out and see what is the interest and so on. But in the longer run, there must be something better than this, I think. That's my take on it. And of course, the biomass has to be sustainable and sourced and all that. That is, of course, important. So.
Yeah. Yeah, I can just add that as long as the actors are not allowed to do a profit from BECCS, they only can cover costs, then the risk is smaller. I would say you won't probably make a facility that only burns biomass without making a profit from a system like this. But it's also prohibited in this system to actually only burn biomass to gain access to.
Yeah, I know that's an extreme case, but it illustrates that there is something, I would argue, fundamental problem with this.
It is.
But of course, it's
in the future, that's if this market increases, that's a risk, yes, that we need to keep an eye on. And also, I should say that there are sustainability criteria for the reverse auction, and it aligns with the EU.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
they are not very, strong criteria, but it's the same criteria that the EU is using, so, and they can develop, I guess.
Then I try to summarize two further questions from the floor. The first one is, so when do we learn what prices have been paid on this reverse auction system? Or just to put it in perspective, at which time can we do the back of the envelope calculation when we know how much has been bought and look at how much Sweden has spent, so that we have a price of CO2 per ton? And then the most discrete question, what insights are you allowed to give us on the progress and the negotiation of Sweden and the EU, how to use those credits? I think there's still some kind of negotiation ongoing, right?
Yes. I think for the numbers, let's say what it costs per ton of stored biogenic carbon dioxide, we will have to do it, as you mentioned here, on the back of the envelope kind of calculation, because these numbers will not be disclosed publicly. There has to be open books towards the agency, but then these will be private numbers, I guess, for the public. So, but it wouldn't be very hard to do that calculation backwards, as you say. But it will take a lot of years until we can do so, because it will take at least 3 years, even for the quickest actor here to get this technology installed, and then it will take some time before they deliver storage or stored biogenic carbon dioxide, and only at delivery they will get paid for it. So it will take time.
I think what I can also add that, for instance, when we have calculated over the years, looked at cost for transport and storage, it has been like, I remember when we started 20 years ago looking at this in Germany and so on, 5-10 euro for storage and maybe 5 euros for transport and so on. But now and it's a difference between cost and price, and for an actor in Sweden that purchase this service, it will be a price they pay, and those are in the order of 60 to 80 euros per ton for transport and storage. So I think we're talking about at least 150 euros per ton of CO2 is my guess, if you count in the together with the capture. So maybe 200. So for these big, say this Stockholm Exergi plant, but that's a pure guess, because Stockholm Exergi is those who have been really out. That they are one of the first one we think will be implementing this, and they have a quite large. They have 2 ads in all newspapers, and they're really active in this of being carbon negative. So I think compared to this, if you look in the costs that you can find in the scientific literature, are generally much lower, I would say. And they should be, because in a way, of course, you would know for society what is the actual cost. But it's difficult if you want to if you mix those, so to say. So that's also a problem, I think, for maybe for IAM modelers, how to what costs to take if you mix kind of cost and price. I mean, I don't know.
And it's also going to be quite tricky to distinguish between capital cost and operational costs. So that's something which might take even further a couple of years to be able to do that in backwards calculations, unless we get such numbers presented for us publicly. When it comes to the negotiation between the Swedish government and the EU Commission, I should say that, yes, you're correct, Wilfried, the Swedish government, the current Swedish government, I should say, want to use BECCS towards obligations in the effort sharing regulation for 2030 already. They have told the Commission that that's the intention of the Swedish government. They have the EU Commission has not responded yet. And last time I contacted the government, they said that they are not expecting a response because they virtually have given up on the possibility of using BECCS for target compliance in the 2030 perspective. So the focus now is rather on the Swedish sort of position and developing this in negotiations beyond 2030, so for the 2040 target and the period between 2031 and 2040. And that position is currently being developed, so it's not official yet, but it's it's happening right now.
Can I make one more comment?
Sure.
Yeah, I mean, another aspect, I think, going back to what we discussed before with this cost coverage, but no sort of profits, is of course, if you do this and then you buy the service from Equinor, which is the Norwegian government, and they make a huge profit, we don't know. And at the same time, they continue to extract oil and gas. They could be also a sort of I think both when it comes to bio-CCS and CCS, I think it's important that the main driving force is a sound climate policy. But if Norway, and for that matter, other types, continue to extract oil and gas and make income from that, and also make income from storing small and comparable amounts of CO2, I think there will be there could be some sort of moral hazard there, and which could spill over in terms of that the public acceptance for this, because as Mathias says, for instance, these district heating companies, they are actually taxpayers' money in a way. So that I think that could be a potential problem of acceptance there, if that well, as climate sort of the whole policy becomes most likely more and more sort of, that we need to more and more challenges with climate change and so on. So I think that's something that I a bit worried about.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I also believe, Sohail, to which I will hand over soon, but again, will confirm that there are upcoming talks on which actually look in this specific question, what drives the acceptance of different CDR and CCS as methods across different states in the EU, depending on how you set it up. And by that, we are almost at the end of the time. So I think it's not now your turn to say this gloomy words to the audience. And first, I thank both Mathias and Filip for their really good insights and comments, and also for the good questions from the floor. I hope I managed to address them somehow. And in case you don't think, you always feel free to shoot us an email, and then we try to explain it in more detail. Thank you.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Wilfried and Mathias and Filip, for great discussion. It was very interesting, and I see lots of comments, and a very nice discussion also was going on during the Q&A session. So the audience, if you are interested, that I can see very much interested in this topic and other topics, broader topics related to CDR, I posted in the chat a link. It's a very simple form that you fill out. Just tell us a little bit about your background and where you see you are fitting. So it helps us organize our online platform better. So we have this online platform with all the partners of the project, including this people that you see today. and people that you will see in the next month's webinar, presenting their papers, discussing the result of their research. Very interesting research is going on the CDR, and we are happy to host such events. So thank you very much, everybody, for joining us. And I hope to see you all next month, February 12, for the next webinar in this series. Have a good day. Bye.